The city was alive with noise. Cars honked, people rushed through the streets, and trains screeched into the station. In the middle of this chaos was Clara, a young woman with tired eyes and messy hair. She carried a small bag over her shoulder, holding tightly to her papers and notes. Clara worked hard every day at a small cafe, and she often dreamed of something better. But for now, she was just trying to make it to her evening shift on time. The clock was ticking. She was late. Clara hurried through the crowded train station, pushing her way past strangers. Her shoes slapped against the floor as she tried to run faster. Sweat formed on her forehead, and her heart pounded in her chest. "Excuse me, sorry, excuse me," she whispered, as she squeezed through the sea of people. And then it happened. In one careless second, she collided with someone. Papers flew out of her hands. Her bag almost slipped off her shoulder. But that was not the shocking part. In the rush, her face bumped into his, and their lips touched. It was a kiss. An impulsive, unexpected kiss. Clara froze. The man froze too. For a moment, the world around them seemed to stop. The sound of the station faded, the people disappeared, and all that remained was the heat of that strange, accidental kiss. Clara's eyes widened. She pulled back quickly, her cheeks turning red. I'm so sorry," she stammered. The man in front of her stood tall. His dark hair was slightly messy from the collision, and his sharp eyes looked straight into hers. For a second, he looked surprised, but then his lips curved into a faint smile. He said nothing, just studied her face with an intensity that made her heart beat even faster. Clara bent down quickly to gather her papers, avoiding his gaze. Her hands shook as she stuffed them back into her bag. People around them were staring, some laughing softly at what had just happened. Clara's embarrassment grew. When she finally stood up again, the stranger was still there. His expression was calm, but his eyes burned with something she couldn't quite understand. I didn't mean to," Clara whispered, her voice trembling. The man tilted his head slightly. His lips parted, as if he was about to say something, but then, he didn't. Instead, he simply gave her a small nod and stepped back. The crowd carried him away before Clara could even ask his name. She stood frozen in the middle of the station, her heart racing wildly. She touched her lips with her fingers, still unable to believe what had happened. "What was that?" she whispered to herself. It was only a kiss. A mistake. A silly accident. That's what she told herself as she walked quickly toward the train. But deep inside, something about that moment refused to leave her. The stranger's eyes, his quiet presence, the way time seemed to stop, none of it felt ordinary. The train ride felt longer than usual. Clara sat by the window, staring at the blur of the city as it passed. She thought about her life, working endless hours at the cafe, barely paying her bills, dreaming of a future that always felt far away. And now this. An accidental kiss with a stranger. She laughed nervously to herself. "It's nothing. Just forget it, Clara. You'll never see him again." But the truth was, she couldn't forget. That night, Clara stood behind the counter at the cafe. The smell of coffee and pastries filled the air. Customers came and went, and she forced herself to smile as she served them. But her mind kept drifting back to the station. Back to the man whose name she didn't know. Who was he? Why did his eyes feel so familiar, as if they carried secrets? She shook her head. "Stop it," she muttered under her breath, wiping the counter. It was just an accident. But fate had its own plans. Because somewhere else in the city, that same stranger was also thinking about her. He sat in the back of a black car, looking out at the streets, remembering the kiss. His assistant spoke to him about business, contracts, and meetings, but his mind wasn't listening. Instead, his thoughts kept returning to the girl at the station, the girl with tired eyes and trembling hands. He should have forgotten her. He had no reason to care. But he didn't. That kiss had stirred something inside him, something he hadn't felt in a very long time. As the car drove on, his lips curved into a quiet smile. "Interesting," he whispered to himself. Clara, of course, didn't know any of this. She believed she would never see him again. She believed their paths had crossed by mistake, and that was the end. But she was wrong. That impulsive kiss was only the beginning. The next morning, The cafe smelled of fresh bread and warm coffee. Clara tied her apron tightly and began wiping tables before customers arrived. Her body moved with routine, but her mind was elsewhere. She kept thinking about yesterday, the train station, the crowd, and that one impossible moment. The kiss. She shook her head. Stop it, Clara. It was nothing. Just an accident. But her cheeks still grew warm whenever she remembered his eyes. The bell above the cafe door jingled as the first customers came in. Clara smiled politely, greeting them with the same words she used every day. Good morning, what can I get for you? She tried to focus on her work, but her heart still carried that strange restlessness. Hours passed. The cafe grew busier. Students came in with laptops, parents brought their children, and office workers rushed to grab their coffee. Clara stayed busy, moving quickly between orders. And then, the door opened again. Clara looked up and froze. It was him. The stranger from the station. The man she had kissed by mistake. He stood in the doorway, tall and calm, his dark eyes searching the room until they landed on her. For a moment, Clara forgot to breathe. She gripped the counter to steady herself. No, it can't be, she whispered. But it was real. He walked toward her with steady steps, the sound of his shoes echoing against the cafe floor. Every detail about him seemed sharper now. The way his suit fit perfectly, the quiet confidence in his movements, the faint trace of mystery around him. Clara's heart raced. She wanted to hide, but she couldn't. She had to face him. Good morning, he said softly when he reached the counter. His voice was calm, deep, and smooth. Clara swallowed hard. Gee, good morning. What would you like? His lips curved into a small smile. Coffee. Black. She quickly turned to make the drink, hoping he wouldn't notice how her hands trembled. She could feel his eyes on her the whole time. It made her nervous, but also strangely alive. When she set the cup in front of him, their fingers almost touched. Clara pulled back quickly, her face turning red. Thank you, he said. His gaze lingered on her, as if he wanted to say something more. Clara bit her lip. She wanted to ask his name, but her voice refused to come out. Instead, she forced a polite smile. Enjoy your coffee. He took the cup and sat at a corner table. To Clara's surprise, he didn't leave right away. He stayed, sipping slowly, his eyes occasionally drifting back to her. Clara tried to ignore it. She served other customers, wiped tables, and refilled the sugar jars. But every time she glanced his way, her heart skipped a beat. Why was he here? Did he come just for coffee? Or for her? Her thoughts spun wildly. When the crowd thinned, Clara finally gathered the courage to approach him. She walked to his table, clutching her notepad tightly. Is everything okay? Do you need anything else? The stranger looked up, his gaze calm but piercing. No, thank you. The coffee is fine. He paused, then added quietly, I didn't expect to see you again. Clara's breath caught in her throat. So he remembered. The kiss. She tried to laugh, though it sounded nervous. Yes, me neither. The city is big. Strange coincidence, I guess. Coincidence, he repeated softly, as if tasting the word. Then his lips curved into a faint smile. Or something else. Clara's heart thumped hard. She had no idea what to say. She wanted to ask him 1,000 questions, who he was, what he wanted, but fear held her back. Just then, another customer entered, and Clara hurried away. But she could feel his eyes following her, patient and steady, as if he wasn't going anywhere. Minutes turned into an hour. Finally, he stood and walked back to the counter. He placed a few bills on the tray and looked at her one last time. See you again, Clara, he said softly. Her eyes widened. Wait, how do you know my name? But before she could get an answer, he was gone. The cafe door closed behind him, leaving Clara standing in shock. She touched her apron where her name tag was pinned and realized, of course, he had read it. Still, something about the way he said her name felt different, like he already knew her somehow. Her heart pounded with a mix of fear and excitement. She whispered to herself, "Who are you?" But deep inside, she already knew this was no coincidence. The stranger had returned. And this time, it felt like the beginning of something much bigger. The next few days at the cafe felt different for Clara. She tried to focus on her work, but her mind was restless. Every time the bell above the door jingled, her heart skipped, half expecting to see him again. And then, one evening, he returned. The cafe was quiet that night. Only a few customers sat in the corners, reading books or sipping tea. Clara was cleaning the counter when the door opened, and there he was again, the stranger. This time, Clara noticed details she had missed before. His suit looked expensive, perfectly tailored. His watch gleamed under the light. His shoes shone as if polished daily. He didn't look like someone who lived an ordinary life. "Good evening," he said in that calm, deep voice. Clara tried to act normal. "Good evening. The usual coffee?" "Yes," he replied, smiling faintly. She made the coffee quickly and set it before him. As always, his eyes lingered on her, making her heart race. He stayed at his table, sipping slowly, watching the people around him with quiet confidence. Clara couldn't take it anymore. She wanted answers. When she finally gathered courage, she walked to his table. Her hands were tight around the notepad she held, though she wasn't taking orders. "Can I ask you something?" He looked up at her, curious. "Of course." "Who are you?" Clara blurted out, her voice trembling. "You keep coming here, and I don't even know your name." And the other day at the station, her face turned red. She stopped mid-sentence. For a moment, silence stretched between them. His lips curved into a slow smile. "My name is Adrian." "Adrian," Clara repeated softly. "Adrian, what?" He tilted his head, amused by her question. "Does it matter?" "Yes," Clara whispered. "It does. Because you don't seem ordinary. You don't walk like an ordinary man. You don't look like one either." Adrian leaned back in his chair, his gaze locked on hers. "And what do I look like, Clara?" Her cheeks flushed. She had no idea how to answer. Rich? Powerful? Untouchable? She shook her head. "I don't know. But you're hiding something." Adrian chuckled softly, a sound that made Clara's stomach twist. "Maybe I am. Or maybe I'm just a man who enjoys your coffee." But Clara wasn't convinced. She noticed how other customers looked at him, some whispering, some stealing glances. One couple near the door seemed to recognize him, their eyes widening in shock. That night, after Adrian left, Clara overheard two customers talking. "Did you see him?" one whispered. "That's Adrian Blackwell. I'm sure of it." Clara's ears perked up. She leaned closer to hear. "Yes, the Adrian Blackwell. The businessman. He owns half the new towers downtown. People say he's worth millions." Clara's heart dropped. She quickly turned away, pretending to wipe the counter, but her hands shook. Adrian Blackwell. Was that who he was? A millionaire. A man from a world she could never belong to. The name echoed in her mind the whole night. She went home to her tiny apartment, lying awake on her narrow bed, staring at the cracked ceiling. She thought about her life, her small paychecks, her unpaid bills, her simple clothes. She thought about him, his calm confidence, his quiet mystery, his eyes that seemed to look straight through her. And then she thought about that kiss. Her lips tingled at the memory. Could it be possible that a man like Adrian Blackwell even cared about a woman like her? Or was it all just coincidence? The next day, Clara tried to push the thoughts aside. She worked harder, serving customers, smiling politely. But she couldn't escape the whispers. More people began noticing him whenever he visited. Some even asked Clara, "How do you know him? What's your connection to Adrian Blackwell?" Clara never knew how to answer. She didn't know him, not really. Yet somehow, fate had tied them together with that one impulsive kiss. That evening, Adrian stayed longer than usual. Clara was wiping down tables when she felt his presence behind her. "You've heard my name, haven't you?" he asked softly. Clara froze, her back still turned. Slowly, she turned around to face him. His eyes were calm, steady, but his voice carried weight. "Yes," she admitted. "I heard. You're Adrian Blackwell, the millionaire businessman." For a moment, he said nothing. Then his lips curved into that quiet smile again. And does that change the way you see me? Clara's throat tightened. I don't know. Adrian stepped closer, his gaze locked on hers. It shouldn't. Because I'm still the same man you kissed at the station. Her breath caught. Her cheeks flushed. She wanted to deny it, but the truth was, she couldn't stop thinking about that kiss. Adrian leaned back slightly, his smile fading into something more serious. Don't worry, Clara. I don't expect you to understand me yet. But soon, you will. With that, he walked out of the cafe, leaving Clara trembling in confusion. She stood frozen, her heart pounding. What did he mean? What was she supposed to understand? One thing was certain, Adrian Blackwell was no ordinary man. And Clara's simple world was about to change forever. The night was quiet, but Clara's heart was not. She lay awake on her small bed, staring at the ceiling, the name Adrian Blackwell echoing in her mind again and again. She had seen his face in newspapers before, though she never paid much attention. Now she couldn't stop thinking about it. The man she kissed by accident was not just a stranger, he was one of the richest men in the city. The thought made her feel dizzy. Her life was small, simple, and filled with struggles. Rent, bills, long hours at the cafe. How could fate tie her to a man like him, even for a moment? The next morning, Clara walked into the cafe, trying to shake off the thoughts. She told herself she needed to focus. But deep inside, a question burned. Would Adrian return again? She didn't have to wait long for her answer. By evening, the bell above the cafe door jingled, and there he was. Adrian Blackwell. Calm, tall, his presence filling the room the moment he stepped inside. Customers whispered, heads turning as he walked to his usual seat. Clara's hands trembled as she brought him his coffee. She placed the cup in front of him, trying to hide her nervousness. Here you go, she said softly. Thank you, Adrian replied, his eyes never leaving hers. For a few minutes, silence stretched between them. Clara wanted to leave, but something in his gaze held her there. Finally, she broke the silence. Why do you keep coming here? She asked, her voice low. You could go to the best restaurants, the most expensive places. Why this little cafe? Adrian smiled faintly. Because of you. Clara's heart skipped. She blinked at him, confused. Me? Yes, he said simply. Since that day at the station. I haven't been able to forget you. Clara froze, her breath caught in her throat. She searched his face, looking for a hint of mockery, but all she saw was honesty. His eyes were steady, his voice calm. I don't understand, she whispered. Why me? I'm just, me. A cafe worker. And you. A millionaire, he finished for her. His tone carried a trace of amusement, but his eyes softened. That title doesn't define me, Clara. Not with you. She shook her head. But it matters. You live in a world I don't belong to. Adrian leaned forward, his voice firm but gentle. The world doesn't matter. That kiss, it wasn't planned, but it meant something. At least to me. And I think, to you, too. Clara's cheeks burned. She wanted to deny it, to tell him he was wrong. But the truth pressed against her heart. That kiss had meant something. She had felt it, deep and real, no matter how much she tried to ignore it. Still, fear whispered in her mind. People like Adrian Blackwell didn't stay with people like her. Their lives were too different. You don't even know me, she said quietly. Adrian's lips curved into a small smile. Then let me know you. Clara's breath caught again. Her heart raced as if it wanted to escape her chest. She didn't know what to say, so she turned quickly, pretending to busy herself with wiping the counter. But her hands shook, betraying her feelings. Adrian stayed until closing time. When the last customer left and Clara locked the door, he was still there, waiting patiently. She finally walked to his table, exhausted but curious. Why are you still here? Adrian stood, his gaze steady. Because I don't want to hide anymore. You already know my name. You already know what I am. So let me tell you something else. Clara's throat tightened. What? He stepped closer, his voice soft but strong. I could have walked away after that kiss. I could have forgotten it. But I didn't. Because in that one moment, when our lips touched, I felt something I've never felt in all my years of wealth and success. Something real. Clara's eyes glistened with tears. She wanted to believe him, but fear still held her heart. Adrian, this doesn't make sense. You're rich, he interrupted again. Yes. Powerful. Maybe. But lonely, Clara. Lonely in ways you can't imagine. Money gives me everything, yet nothing that truly matters. But you, his voice softened. You gave me something I didn't even know I was missing. Silence filled the cafe. Clara stood frozen, staring into his eyes. Her chest ached, her heart torn between disbelief and hope. Finally, she whispered, I don't know if I can be part of your world. Adrian took a step closer, his eyes shining with sincerity. Then let me come into yours. Her lips parted, but no words came out. She could only stand there, trembling, as his words sank deep into her soul. For the first time, Clara realized this was not just a coincidence. That impulsive kiss had unlocked something neither of them could escape. And now, the truth was out, Adrian Blackwell wanted her. Not as a game, not as a passing interest, but as something real. But could Clara trust him? Could she trust herself? Her heart knew the answer. Her mind wasn't ready. And that was only the beginning of the storm about to come. The days that followed were not easy for Clara. Ever since Adrian's confession, her mind had been spinning. She wanted to believe him, his words, his eyes, his sincerity, but doubts filled her heart. Clara lived in a small rented room, worked long hours at the cafe, and counted every coin to survive. Adrian lived in a world of glass towers, black cars, and glittering parties. How could their lives ever fit together? But Adrian was determined. He came to the cafe almost every day now. Sometimes he sat quietly, watching her from his corner table. Sometimes he spoke to her, asking simple questions about her life, her favorite book, her favorite food, the little things that made her smile. Clara found herself answering, even laughing with him. Slowly, she realized he wasn't just a millionaire with money and power. He was also a man, lonely, searching, human. But the outside world wasn't so kind. One afternoon, two women walked into the cafe. They were dressed in designer clothes, their heels clicking loudly against the floor. When they saw Adrian sitting there, their eyes widened. They whispered and giggled, stealing glances at Clara. That girl, one of them muttered, loud enough for Clara to hear. She works in a cafe. Can you believe it? The other laughed. Adrian Blackwell could have anyone, and he chooses her. Clara's cheeks burned. She tried to ignore them, but their voices cut deep into her heart. She looked at Adrian, but he didn't seem to care about their whispers. He only looked at Clara with calm eyes, as if she were the only person in the room. Still, the doubts grew heavier. That night, Clara walked home alone, her mind full of questions. Could she handle this? Could she survive in his world, where everyone judged her, where she would always feel like an outsider? The next morning, her fear became reality. A photo of her and Adrian leaving the cafe appeared in a local magazine. The headline screamed, Adrian Blackwell seen with cafe girl, who is she? Customers whispered. Some pointed at Clara. Others stared openly, curious about her connection to Adrian. Clara felt her chest tighten with embarrassment. She wanted to hide. When Adrian arrived later that day, she pulled him aside, her voice shaking. This is too much, Adrian. People are talking. They're laughing at me. I can't live like this. He looked at her with concern. Clara, don't listen to them. Let them talk. They don't matter. But they do matter, Clara said, her eyes filling with tears. Because I don't belong in your world. I never will. Adrian reached for her hand, but she pulled away. Clara, he said softly, his voice almost breaking, I don't care about their world. I care about you. Just you. Her heart ached at his words. She wanted to believe him, but the weight of their differences crushed her spirit. She shook her head. Maybe we were never meant to be. Maybe that kiss was just a mistake. For the first time, She saw pain in Adrian's eyes. He stepped closer, his voice low but firm. Don't call it a mistake. That moment was real. You felt it, Clara. I know you did. Her tears spilled over. She whispered, I don't know what to do. Adrian gently touched her hand. Do nothing. Just, let me stay by your side. Let me prove to you that love doesn't care about money, or power, or the world. It only cares about hearts. Clara's chest tightened. She wanted to pull away, but she also wanted to fall into his arms. Between her world and his, she stood on a fragile bridge, afraid to take the next step. That night, she cried alone in her room, torn between fear and desire. She remembered the kiss, his eyes, his words. She remembered the way her heart came alive whenever he was near. But she also remembered the whispers, the stares, the cruel laughter. 2 worlds. 2 choices. And Clara didn't know which one to choose. But deep inside, she sensed that fate wasn't done with them yet. The story between her and Adrian was far from over. The storm inside Clara's heart did not calm easily. Days passed, yet her mind was still filled with questions. Should she trust Adrian? Should she allow him into her life, even when the whole world seemed against her? She tried to avoid him, but Adrian didn't give up. He visited the cafe again and again, even when she barely spoke to him. He stayed patient, his eyes always warm, his words always gentle. One evening, after closing the cafe, Clara stepped outside and found Adrian waiting by his car. Why are you here again? She asked, tired and emotional. Because I can't walk away, he said firmly. Not from you. Clara shook her head. Adrian, we're too different. Look at you, your life is shining, powerful, and full of people. My life is small. I don't fit in your world. Adrian's voice softened. Then I'll fit into yours. Her heart trembled at his words. He opened the car door and said, Please, just one evening. Come with me. Let me show you something. Against her fears, Clara agreed. They drove through the city, the night lights glowing against the sky. Adrian took her not to a fancy restaurant, not to a grand hotel, but to a quiet garden on the edge of the city. The air was cool, the stars bright above them. Clara looked around, surprised. Why here? Adrian smiled. Because it's simple. No cameras, no noise, no rich crowds. Just us. They sat on a bench beneath a tall tree. For a long time, they didn't speak. The silence was peaceful, filled only with the sound of wind in the leaves. Finally, Adrian turned to her. Clara, I know you're scared. I know my world looks dangerous, full of judgment and gossip. But listen to me, I don't want to change you. I don't want you to be anyone else. I just want you. Her eyes shimmered with tears. But how can this ever work? People will never accept me. They'll always say I'm not enough for you. Adrian reached for her hand, holding it gently. Let them say what they want. My life has been filled with empty smiles, fake friends, and cold rooms. You're the only one who makes me feel alive. Don't you see? It was never about the kiss, it was about what came after. It was about you. Clara's heart pounded. She wanted to believe him, but the fear was still there. And if I fail you? If I can't survive in your world? He smiled softly. Then we'll build our own world. One where it's just us. You don't have to fight alone anymore. Not when I'm here. Tears slid down her cheeks as she finally let the walls around her heart fall. She whispered, Adrian, I'm afraid. He leaned closer, his eyes steady. So am I. But sometimes, love is worth the fear. In that moment, Clara realized something deep inside her. She didn't need to belong to his world. He was already stepping into hers. He was willing to fight for her, to stand with her, no matter the cost. Her chest ached, but it was no longer from pain, it was from hope. Slowly, she leaned forward, and for the second time in her life, her lips met Adrian's. This kiss was not impulsive, not accidental. It was chosen. It was real. When they pulled apart, Adrian whispered, from one kiss. I found everything I never knew I was looking for. Clara smiled through her tears. For the first time, She believed him. For the first time, she believed in them. Weeks later, Clara stood by Adrian's side at a charity event. Cameras flashed, voices shouted, and whispers filled the room. People stared, some with envy, some with judgment. But Adrian never let go of her hand. He held her proudly, his eyes shining only for her. Clara felt nervous, but when she looked at him, she found courage. She realized she didn't need to fit into this world perfectly, because she already had a place. Right next to Adrian. The whispers continued, but Clara no longer cared. Because she understood the truth now, love wasn't about status, or wealth, or power. Love was about two hearts choosing each other, again and again, no matter what. And that impulsive kiss, the one she once thought was a mistake, had become the moment that changed everything. Their fates, once so far apart, were now forever intertwined.